Hello everyone, this is Padmanabh Reddy and welcome to Lit Critique. Today we'll be looking at what exactly was the Renaissance. Like many people just state the Renaissance as rebirth of ideas, rebirth of knowledge, but I'll argue that that's not exactly the point over here, because it is not just rebirth. Because we had art before, we had writings before, we had sculptures before, but what makes Renaissance different from all the other things? What exactly was it? So we'll be looking at all of those things with the help of some examples, as well as all the historical precedents that actually happened at that point of time, and also the socio-economic conditions of Europe, as well as the other places, even the Middle East as well. We'll be looking at all of those things while answering this question of what exactly was the Renaissance. Commenting on this statement that Renaissance is a rebirth of ideas and rebirth of knowledge, as I've said earlier, we had writings before, we had sculptures before, we had art before, but what makes this Renaissance different from all the other things? I would argue that Renaissance is not just the rebirth of ideas. Obviously, it was the rebirth of ideas, but it was a state of mind. Obviously, it wasn't some kind of event where people would get up in the morning and they would say, okay, we are now living in the Renaissance. It's not like that. It's not like the French Revolution, which just started with the storming of Bastille and all the processions in the French streets and Paris. And it doesn't work like that. Renaissance, the word Renaissance was given by the later historians to this particular period. So why did they give to this particular period? That was to facilitate the students and also facilitate all the historians who are studying this particular period. So the people who lived during the Renaissance, they had no idea that they were living in the Renaissance. Before getting into the literary aspects of the Renaissance, let us briefly look at the history, what exactly triggered the Renaissance. Well, there isn't a single event that we can tell, okay, this is a particular event that triggered the whole thing, but many scholars agree to this point that it was a fall of Constantinople. And what exactly was a fall of Constantinople? I'll just explain it to you briefly. So Constantinople is today known by the name of Istanbul, which is the capital of Turkey. And at that point of time, it was controlled by the Romans. So it was a Byzantine Empire. So this will go on a long time. If I tell you the whole history of the Eastern Roman Empire and the Western Roman Empire and the Tetrarchy and all, I'll not delve into all of those things. But the Byzantine Empire was the eastern part of the Roman Empire, which had the capital of Istanbul, and that fell into the hands of Ottomans. So when Constantinople fell into the hands of Ottomans, many Greek scholars and many other people who had valuable texts and valuable books and all, they fled that place towards Europe, and they fled to Florence in Italy. So that was where the whole Renaissance thing kicked off. When these people fled from the Byzantine Empire to Florence and brought with them all the ancient texts which contained philosophies of Plato, Aristotle and many other people, when they brought all these things, the Renaissance kicked off. That literally means that people started studying those things. All of these things were lost with time. So obviously these things were preserved at some point, but they were lost in the mainstream. That literally means that these things, all the Plato's philosophies like the Republic, Phaedrus, Phaedo and many other texts by Plato, many other texts by Aristotle, many by Cicero, many by many other scholars of Greek and Roman thought, all of these things were not being studied in the mainstream. They were somewhere forgotten, and now when these people have brought them from the Byzantine Empire, these texts started getting mainstream, and they started to get the prominence that they deserved. With people reading all of these texts brought from all these people who fled from the Byzantine Empire, this caused a total academic revolution in Florence, as well as it spread to all other parts of Europe. It even spread to England. We'll talk about the English Renaissance in a different video altogether. It requires a different video, and I'll talk deeply about the Italian Renaissance too in another video. But let us stick to the point of what exactly the Renaissance was. To some extent, it actually was the rediscovery of all the ideas of classical Roman thought and classical Greek thought. But on a broader scale, if you look at it in a careful manner, you will notice that it is not just the rediscovery of ideas. It was the state of mind. And what was that state of mind? Let us look into what exactly was that. Because to understand the Renaissance, we exactly need to understand what was the state of mind, because the state of mind exactly was the Renaissance. Not only an explosion of art and other activities in whole of Europe, but it was a state of mind that was very, very radical. And to understand why it was exactly radical, we need to understand two stories. We need to know two stories to understand the Renaissance and the state of mind that people were in. The first story is the book of Job from the Old Testament of the Bible, and the second story is about the story of Prometheus. Before telling you briefly what was the story of the book of Job, let me remind you that the church had the say in almost every single aspect of a person's life. We even see that in Chaucer. And if you haven't read Chaucer, you will get the I button above. You will have the whole playlist of my lectures on Chaucer. You can watch that for Chaucer. But for this video, let us come back to the Renaissance part. Almost for 1,000 years, from 4th century till the 15th century, church had the absolute say in every person's life. It was even above the king. So a church was so rich that it could make some kingdoms really, really jealous. And we can see that even in Chaucer, the overarching power of church can be seen in the Canterbury Tales as well. But with the rise of Roman Empire and with the legitimization of Christianity as the official religion of the Roman Empire by Constantine I, and till the 15th century, till the Renaissance, church had the control of every single aspect of the person's life. And how did it do that? It was through Bible. And one of the most important stories of Bible is the book of Job. The book of Job is about a man named as Job. So he is really rich, and he lives by the countryside with his family. One fine day he faces with utter disbelief that all his cattle and all his animals are driven away, and his wealth is all now gone. And now he is also affected by many skin diseases as well. He has boils all over his body. Now his wife tells that, okay, curse God and die, but he refuses to do that. He tells, okay, God gave me riches, God gave me happiness, now God is giving me sorrow, so I'll accept even that. And his friends come by and even they tell that, okay, you might have done some sin, that's the reason why God is giving you all these problems and all. And I'll not get into every single detail that Satan was the one who is doing all of these things. I'll not get into every single detail and the theology behind the book of Job, but I'm focusing on the part where the church used this story against all the disbelievers and all the people who were against the church, or they weren't fearful of the church. I'll tell you what exactly the theology was. So God comes by and he tells that, okay, you were getting more and more moralistic. You were believing that you're praying to me so that I am giving to you, but it is not the case, because I like to give it to you. So that is the reason I give it to you, and you are nothing in front of me. I created the world, I created the biggest beast on land, that is the behemoth, and the beast of the sea, that is a leviathan. And he tells all of those things, and by the end God forgives him and he gives him all his riches and his health back. So this story was used by the church as a warning to all those people who didn't believe in God, or they had less piety in them. They would show that, okay, if you don't believe in God, or if you are less pious, or if you are less religious, this will be happening to you. This is from the Bible. You have to follow it. This is a word of God. So this was a story that was told by the church to everyone. And this is a reason, this is one of the big reasons that church was really, really powerful, because it played on this idea of fear. And this is what Machiavelli talks about in his treatise The Prince, which is again a product of the Renaissance. I'll talk about Machiavelli and his Prince and all the Italian Renaissance in a different video. But this story started getting challenged when it came to the Renaissance, because people were thinking in a different manner. And what was that different manner? I'll tell you with the example of another story. This is a story of Prometheus. Prometheus was a Greek god who stole fire and gave it to humans, and this was disliked by Zeus a lot. He warned Prometheus many times, and he warned everyone many times that fire shouldn't be going to humans. But Zeus's words weren't paid heed by Prometheus. Prometheus showed him utter arrogance, and he gave fire to humans. This was totally enraging to Zeus, and he tied him to a rock with the chains of adamant. He was also given a punishment that an eagle would come every day. It would rip off his stomach and it would eat the sweet black blood of its liver, and it would fly away back. And at every night, the stomach would grow back again and it would continue for eternity. But still, he showed his utter arrogance. Prometheus showed his utter arrogance towards Zeus, and he continued his punishment. Although he was saved by two people, although it is very disputed how Prometheus was saved. One story says that he was saved by Chiron the centaur, who offered his own life for Prometheus, and in a second retelling we are told that Hercules came by and he killed that eagle, and he ripped that adamantine chains with his Herculean strength, and he took back Prometheus with him. But either way, the whole point over here is the arrogance of Prometheus and his will to refuse the authority. And this is what interested the whole Renaissance. This idea of rebelling the authority was what struck the chord with all the thinkers in the Renaissance, and the church controlled the whole life of all the people for 1,000 years. But with this new knowledge and with this new discovery of knowledge, these people now started rebelling against the authority. And this is what we need to understand about the Renaissance, that it wasn't just the rediscovery of ideas and rediscovery of knowledge. It was a state of mind. It was a state of Promethean thought. Well, the works of Plato, Aristotle, Cicero, and one of the most important thinkers, Cicero. We often forget the works of Cicero and his legal documents, because that paved a way for many thinkers during the Renaissance, including Petrarch, because Petrarch studied a lot of Cicero. And by studying all of these texts, what do we get to know? That all these people had their own sort of development, their personal human development that happened during the Renaissance. And this is one of the most important aspects that we have to notice, that many thinkers actually embodied on this idea that all the Greek thought and the Roman thought contained something called as freedom of speech and freedom of expression that was totally curtailed by the church. And you would be really surprised to know that many scrolls and many books and many manuscripts in the Library of Alexandria in Egypt and many other places were burned down, although by fires, and some by Muslim occupants, and some by even the Christian fathers and Christian priests, because they said that those were really beautiful. Those texts were really beautiful and they weren't conforming to their idea of Christianity, because they promoted this idea of free speech and free thought. This wasn't the same kind of thing that was propagated by these priests. These priests propagated to think in the line and the view of the church. But these texts, obviously, they encourage people to think independently, and by thinking independently, they will be having the reason and they will be having the capacity to look beyond Bible and to look beyond the interpretations of normal priests and the bishops, not even normal, but the priests and bishops, which literally happened with Martin Luther when he struck the 95 Thesis to the Church of Wittenberg in the 16th century. It was around 1520s or so. Even Machiavelli was true when he said that the Roman Catholic Church wouldn't even survive without any reforms. Another development that fueled the whole Renaissance was the invention of a printing press by John Gutenberg, which helped to propagate ideas faster than ever. Because earlier, every text has to be written by hand, and it has to be copied and recopied and recopied, and that would take a lot of time, and that would also create errors as well. But with the advent of printing press, it became easy to distribute the ideas, and it became easy to propagate the whole ideas. And this was literally very helpful for Luther when he came to the picture, and when he distributed the 95 Thesis, and Lutheranism sprung out of Catholicism, and it spread in the whole Europe, and it literally changed the whole landscape of Europe as a whole. And with the advent of the printing press, the Bible, the distribution of Bible became even more easier, because now it can be even bought by lower class people which who didn't have the money to buy Bible before. Only they used to listen it on the sermons by the priests and the bishops, but they didn't read it themselves. John Wycliffe was responsible for the first English translation of the Bible from Latin, and this was really important because it helped people from the lower class to study what exactly the Bible was, to read what the Bible was, because Latin wasn't understood by everyone. Latin was a language of the church. It wasn't the language of the commoners. So this printing press literally, this removed the gap, it narrowed the gap between the church and the people, and this was when the real part of the Renaissance started taking place. Because as I've said earlier, propagation of ideas was now really easy, and when you can literally propagate ideas with the printing of paper and printing of an ink on the paper, and you can just distribute it around, so it becomes really easy for you and also for your company or anything else, for spreading your business as well. And this is where we get to see the roots of capitalism. This is where we get to see the starting of the end of feudalism. And we will see later that feudalism literally ends in all of Europe, this excluding Russia. Russia kept feudalism till the 19th century. It didn't get rid of feudalism, but capitalism starts over here. The role of capitalism is really important for the nation building, and also I'll not get into the exact nation building part now, but the role of capitalism cannot be again removed from the picture, because it is really important. Now with the propagation of ideas really easier, and with the people having the resources to learn about the Greek and Roman classical thought and classical philosophy, now everybody had the access to develop their own ideas. And this is where we get one of the greatest pieces of writings from whole of Europe. I'm not even just restricting it to Italy, the Italian part of the Renaissance, but even the English part of the Renaissance. When Renaissance reached the English shores, it was literally a boon for the English writers, because we get writers like William Shakespeare, we get writers like Christopher Marlowe, Sir Walter Raleigh, and many other writers who flourished during the Renaissance. And William Shakespeare is considered as the greatest writer during the Renaissance, because he embodied many such Renaissance traits in him. But I would argue that the best text during the Renaissance, one of the most important texts during the Renaissance, was Dr. Faustus by Christopher Marlowe, because Dr. Faustus, the character of Dr. Faustus in his play, in Marlowe's play, literally tells us what exactly a Renaissance man is, what exactly a Renaissance man wants. He is in the pursuit of knowledge. Let it be to any extent. He will even sell out his soul for knowledge, but he will gain knowledge at the end. Then it also shows us the futility of knowledge as a whole. But I would argue that Dr. Faustus is one of the most important texts during the Renaissance, and we will have Dr. Faustus in another video. It actually requires a series to cover the whole play, and it is such a beautiful play that if you read it, you'll fall in love with Marlowe's writing. As I've argued earlier, that Renaissance is not just a rediscovery or the rebirth of ideas or rebirth of knowledge. It is a state of Promethean mind that we have to defer the authority, we have to challenge the authority. And I want to also argue on this point that it wasn't just these two things. It was a relocation of power. It was the centralization of character. It was the centralization of power as well. It was a total change in the thinking structure of people. And and all those feminist thought and all the other political thoughts and other philosophical thoughts that we see later in the later centuries, even in the feminist thought as well, because women writers started coming after the Renaissance. Before Renaissance, there weren't women writers. In the Middle Ages, they weren't women writers as well, because there were like really one or two people which mainstream people don't even know about. But after the Renaissance, women writers like Afra Ben and later writers started coming up, and after them started this feminist thought by Mary Wollstonecraft and then Simone de Beauvoir and Elaine Showalter and many other people like that. And these people, somewhere or the other, are connected to the Renaissance, and without the Renaissance and without this ideas of differing the authority and without this idea of challenging the authority, we wouldn't have found the beautiful feminist thoughts and beautiful political thoughts as well as philosophical thoughts that we have in the later centuries as well. This is a reason that we have to study Renaissance. This is a reason that we need to focus on every single aspect of the Renaissance, and we'll be talking about the Italian Renaissance, the English Renaissance, who exactly Martin Luther was, what was the Protestant Reformation. I'll talk about all these things in the later videos, but for this video I just wanted to give you the brief idea of what exactly the Renaissance was, because it is mostly again it is thought just to be a rebirth of ideas and rebirth of knowledge, which is not exactly again true, because it was a state of mind. We had art and we had literature before as well. So what makes Renaissance totally different from earlier periods is its idea of having an individual thought and its idea of having a Promethean thought. If you like this video, please do leave a like, and if you have any doubt, please do put it in the comment box down below. I'll be reading all your doubts and be clearing them, all of them as well. And please do subscribe to all the social media handles of Lit Critique, and also don't forget to subscribe to Lit Critique channel as well. This is Padmanabh Reddy from Lit Critique signing off. Bye bye.